It's October, it's spooky month, and I want to start this off with something spooky.
Right, that's pretty much obvious.
Can we not? I want to actually sleep tonight.
No dice, bitch boy. You're going to sit here and participate like the good president you are.
I want to do a few Reddit horror stories. Actually, I'll pick out 4 for us to read out, and it'll be like sitting at a campfire telling ghost stories.
Donald, you know Joe can't read past the first page of a book. How the hell can he keep up with a Reddit horror story? They can be long as hell.
That fucking Dr. Seuss and his long-ass books.
That's why we got Obama here. If Joe fails to read something or falls asleep, he can readjust the old fuck to continue if he needs it.
I have a feeling I'll be doing that quite a few times.
I'll go first because I said so, and if you guys have a problem with that, then go fuck yourselves.
Just start reading a story already. Joe's eyes look heavy already.
Okay, fine, fuck. This incident happened about 5 years ago. This is a story that I never really tell anymore because most people are either uncomfortable hearing it or make well-meaning comments about what I should have done in this situation without really understanding how differently your mind works when you're experiencing absolute panic. But you guys seem to get it. So here's my story. I was living in a relatively nice apartment in downtown Memphis working as an ophthalmic technician. I arrived home from work at my usual time. Around 4:30 p.m., unlocked my door and went inside. I set my phone, wallet, and keys on the kitchen island, hearing my heavy metal front door swing shut loudly behind me, and began taking care of some errands around the house. Having grown up in a small town, it was habit for me to not lock my door during the day, especially when I knew my husband would be home soon anyway. I've never forgotten to lock my door once in the 5 years since this day. I walked through my bathroom and into my large walk-in closet and began hanging up the laundry that I'd started earlier in the day before work. My front door opened and I smiled with surprise. My husband was home a little early and I was happily called out to him, "I'm in here, love!" I was met with silence and slowly began to feel that sinking feeling of something is wrong crawl up my spine. I tried to shake it off, thinking my husband simply hadn't heard me, and walked out into my living room kitchen area. Standing on the other side of my kitchen island was a complete stranger. He was male, older than me. I would estimate 50s, but it's hard for me to recall exact facial features or details from this moment, and was just standing there staring at me. No ski mask, no weapon, just watching me. I wondered if he'd maybe walked into the wrong apartment and was going to apologize and leave. But as he continued to stare, I realized that I needed to do something other than just gape at this stranger in my house. I stood taller, puffed up my chest in an attempt to look more threatening, which is hard to do as a small female, and used a loud, clear voice, telling him to get out of my apartment, that he had no business being here. He completely ignored me like I hadn't spoken. Then he began to pick up my things, my cell phone, my keys, my wallet. He picked them up methodically and put them into his own pockets. That's when it truly hit me that this person was dangerous. I was naive enough to believe this was all a mistake until that moment. I darted forward toward the only other device I had that would allow me to get help, my computer. I had to take a few steps closer to the intruder in order to reach it, but still had about 12 to 15 feet between us, so I knew I could grab it and run before he could reach me. As I picked it up and turned to run, I saw him start to move after me, and I sprinted back toward the bathroom because it was the only place I could go and put 2 locked doors between us. My bathroom door and the closest door. I slammed and locked the first door, and within seconds, I could hear him messing with it, trying to open it. I ran into the closet and locked that door too, opening my computer and getting on Facebook Messenger to contact my husband. I sent message after message, pleading with him to call 911 and tell them there was an intruder in the apartment. He got the messages within minutes and assured me that he had a dispatcher on the phone and was leaving work himself to try and get to me if he could. I waited and waited. The bathroom door opened and the intruder came inside. He moved to the closet door and started trying to break that door down too. Here's the part where people usually start giving me advice on how I should have acted, but all I can tell you is that I was frozen with fear, with shock. I don't know. But I didn't scream or cry or search for a weapon in that dark closet. I didn't brace the door or try to hold it closed. I just kneeled in my closet and waited to die because I just knew that's what was going to happen. People like to tell me that I lived in an apartment. Surely if I'd screamed, someone would have heard and come to help. Surely there was something heavy enough in my closet to use to defend myself. Hell, even the laptop I had would hurt if I swung it at someone. Why didn't I do anything? I don't really have an answer for that. But the closet door miraculously held. I heard frustrated footsteps go back out into the living area of my apartment. I heard things breaking, bottles shattering, my drawers and refrigerator and cabinets being flung open as things were torn out of them. I continued to sit in that closet, silently crying, wanting to leave, but feeling that death was inevitable. I feel awful about my selfishness in that moment, but I messaged my mom, who lived a 15 hours drive away, and told her what was happening. I desperately wanted comfort and to tell her how much I love her. I'm not a parent, but I can only imagine the fear and helplessness I put her through, knowing her daughter was in danger and there was nothing she could do to help. She messaged me constantly, begging me to keep replying. I told her I would as long as I could, but I also told her to tell my brothers I loved them, to help my husband through whatever happened next if it ended badly for me. The intruder started messing with the closet door again, mumbling disjointed words that I couldn't really distinguish. I remember hoping that the police would get to the apartment before my husband, that he wouldn't be the one to find me in whatever state this invader left me in. The front door opened again, and it was my husband shouting for me. The intruder walked out toward the living room/kitchen area again, where my front door was located, and I opened the door and darted from the closet to find my husband on the ground with him, pinning him in place. The man kept mumbling, at times yelling, but never really put up much resistance. This entire part is a blur for me. I remember feeling like the room was spinning, filled with fear, mostly for my husband at this point. Eventually, the police found the apartment. It took them about 25 minutes to arrive, which still blows my mind. I know time seems to move slowly during scary situations, so I thought it was less than that, but from the time my husband dialed 911 to the time officers arrived, it was 25 excruciating minutes. This isn't intended to bash them in any way. It just always seemed like this was an unusually long response time for a home invasion. They got my things back from the man and took him out of my apartment. I numbly went through the process of filing a police report, telling them what happened. One of the officers commented that I should really keep my door locked at all times. I remember feeling like he was being insensitive at the time or blaming me for what happened, but later recognized his words were coming from experience. I'm sure he's seen this situation and differently for other women. Within 30 minutes, the scariest incident of my life was over, but I've carried the fear, the violation, the anxiety of having someone intrude into my space for years. If it happened to me once, it could happen again. If you've made it this far, thanks for listening. Please consider continuing, because this isn't all doom and gloom. If this or something similar has happened to you and you're still struggling with the aftermath of it, the sleepless nights, the laying awake listening for sounds of forced entry, the nightmares, the constant checking and rechecking your locks. This is what eventually helped me. A year after this took place, my husband and I moved to the Midwest for his job. We selected a safe town with a nice apartment complex and chose a third-floor apartment with only one point of entry. I looked up every statistic on crime for the neighborhood, finding that an isolated incidence of car theft was the only thing reported in decades. I still couldn't sleep at night. It was definitely better than staying in the same apartment in Memphis. But my husband often works night shifts now, and I simply couldn't continue being terrified to sleep at night. I realized my biggest fear wasn't that something could happen again, but that if it did, I was just as unprepared now as I was then. I hadn't changed anything other than locking my door, and I knew I would likely freeze up again and leave my life up to being able to hide well enough or having a door hold long enough to save me, and that was unacceptable. I walked into a martial arts school with an excellent self-defense program, introduced myself, and started talking classes. At first, I was quiet, hiding in the back of the room, and generally keeping to myself. My instructor, who is both incredibly kind and incredibly insightful, slowly built up my confidence and brought me out of my bubble of fear. After several months of training, I finally shared my reason for taking classes with him, and he's worked with me tirelessly to give me the ability to protect myself in any environment. I've been training for years now, and the difference it has made in every aspect of my life is unbelievable. The meek, quiet girl that waited to die in her closest doesn't exist. I'm confident. I am strong. I am worthy of living and protecting myself in my home. I no longer am ashamed of how I handled the situation I was in, but I also understand what steps I can take to ensure that I'm safe. It wasn't easy, and it didn't happen overnight, but it was worth it. I recognize this might not be a solution or option for everyone. Your experience is valid. And however you decide to cope with your own story, is the right choice for you. This is how I happen to do it, and it's worked well for me. Thank you again for listening. I'm a little afraid to share this because I'm not sure how people will respond, but maybe doing so will help someone else that's feeling alone with this. If anyone is struggling with their own story and wants a kind ear to listen, I'm here. Stay safe out there.
That story was on r/Let's Not Meet by Typical Succotash 41. That was certainly a terrifyingly story that seemed to be likely true.
I'm now not so trusting of my neighborhood anymore.
Not gonna lie, I was feeling like even I'm not safe and I shouldn't trust thy neighbor, but it was a good one nonetheless. And I can plainly fucking see that Joe is passed the fuck out.
What? I was not sleeping. You cannot prove anything. I am totally innocent.
Right, yeah, like we'll believe you didn't just sleep through him reading.
Anyway, who wants the next read?
I'll go next. This one is a shorter story. This one happened to me when I was quite young. It was a late summer night. I was sleeping in my bed when I was awoken by someone sitting on my bed. I rolled over to see who it was. My family is not the type to just come into each other's room, so I was worried something bad had happened. When I opened my eyes, I was blinded by my lights coming on. I rubbed my eyes, and once I could finally see, there, it was a solid black human shape. From everything I've tried to find out about what it was, the only thing I could come up with was a shadow person. But I'm not entirely sure it was one of them. It had a human shape but was solid black, but it was also hairy, like how I imagine Bigfoot would look if he got covered in that world's darkest paint. I slowly backed up against my wall and pulled my covers up to my face. It didn't pay me any attention. It began to mess with my TV. It was a 32-inch one of those old TVs with a fat back. It was new. I bought it myself just a few weeks before. Once my TV turned on, the screen started to go funny, like how it would act if you held a magnet up to the fatback televisions. It was getting angry with the TV not working. It turned it off and swung open my door with such force it made a dent in my wall. I was too scared to turn off my lights or shut my door. Somehow, I managed to fall asleep. I woke up in the morning assuming it was all a dream. My door was open and my lights were on, but maybe I just fell asleep with my lights on and the cat pushed open my door. I was still a little freaked out because my dream had never been that real. I checked my TV and the screen was messed up with a green tint to it, and the dent in the wall was actually there. Does anyone know what this thing could have been, or why it was so obsessed with my TV, or how it actually caused the magnetic influence on the screen? This story was on r/True Scary Stories by Mr. Freeze.
I'm surprised you didn't stutter that often when reading.
Fuck off, Bush. That is a dead joke at this point, and I don't motherfucking stutter anymore.
You're right, you just have the Jeff Goldblum-isms.
Oh, whatever. Who's next?
I thought Joe was going to go third, but by the looks of him being asleep, that's not happening.
President, bow down to me.
I'll go third. My wife and I spent years searching for a starter home. Finding the right home can be a difficult process in itself, but there were the added factors of being on an extremely tight budget and only qualifying for a type of loan that allowed rural housing only. That being the case, it was if someone drew a large circle around most of the communities in our area on a map and said, you can't buy there. It was just as well, as I at least preferred the quiet life of country living. One place in particular caught our interest. It was located in a small village called Wright in the middle of orchard country. This town consisted of one old church with a cemetery, a bar, and a smattering of old houses. It seemed perfect. We looked at the home and thought it would suit our needs nicely. The only catch was that the two current residents were technically squatting there. It's been a long time, so I don't remember the exact details, but I want to say they'd been renting from the actual homeowner and had stopped making payments. Either way, the house would have to go through a short sale and the renter-squatters evicted before we would be taking possession. It was a combination of being weary from looking for so long, having been through the full range of emotions while doing so, and thinking it was a really cool setting, but we decided to go for it. The current tenants seemed nice, so we thought the odds were on our side that they would leave peacefully and not trash the house. Fortunately, we had no issues there because we didn't make it that far. The listing agent was quite the eccentric and rarely returned calls placed by our agent. To make a long story a bit shorter, we spent 2 months trying to get somewhere with the purchase. Our offer was accepted, but nothing else happened. Every time we spoke with our realtor, she told us she couldn't reach the listing agent, or he was being evasive. Eventually, we had enough and backed out of the deal. At the time, we were sad it didn't go through. Fast forward roughly a month down the road, we were watching the TV in our duplex one evening when the old house directly across the street from the one we attempted to buy showed up on the screen. On fire. Apparently, the 20-year-old kid living there had shot 3 of his family members to death, then burned the house down in an attempt at destroying the evidence. He fled the area and was on the run for a while. We couldn't believe it. Shivers ran down my spine when I thought about the fact that we could have been 20 feet from a multiple homicide. No, the violence didn't spread to our house, but it was definitely close enough. I still get creeped out when I think about that, even 13 years later. This was on r/true scary stories by Squarebody 7987.
May I ask why you used a faux British accent, Bush?
Did I? Wow, I didn't even notice.
Last up is Joe, and I'm still asleep.
Joe, wake the fuck up!
That was a good story, Corn Pop there. I guess I'll go second. First, what number are we on?
Oh my good fucking God, whatever. Just please stay awake when reading the story you chose. I don't want all this to go to waste for some bullshit.
Relax, my guy. I got a good one picked out, and I'm well rested. I'm a young guy with a nighttime job living in an area of town that has gotten pretty sketchy the past decade or so. The police are here at least once a month to sort out some violent or drug-related crime. I'm a very routine-focused person, so for the past 8 years before going to work at 1:30 a.m., I always take my dog out for a walk around 1 a.m. In fall of last year, I went for the routine dog walk, one misty night at 1 a.m. like I usually do. I made a right turn after exiting the gate, and just as I passed the corner of my apartment building, I noticed a fuzzy shape on the ground just outside the gate of the neighboring building. I stopped in my tracks and took in what I was looking at. I determined it was just a cat laying on its side on the pavement. I thought this was odd, but since I know my dog would most certainly bark at it and wake up the entire neighborhood, I chose to turn around and take a different route for the walk than usual. For the rest of this walk, I was reflecting on that cat. There was something very off about the cat just laying relaxed on the ground in the middle of the night, with no people around. Once my walk had looped me back to my gate, I decided to turn the corner again and see if the cat was still there. Mind you, a full 15 minutes had gone by at this point. Sure enough, it was still there. Same position and everything. Now I thought this scene was even more odd. I took my dog up to the apartment, put my work clothes on, grabbed my car keys and headed out. As I exited the elevator, the image of the relaxed cat laying outside was still in the back of my mind, perplexing me. Instead of going into the underground garage, I decided to instead go out of the main gate one last time to check if the cat was still there. I exited, turned the corner, and once again, the cat was still laying there. Since my dog wasn't with me this time, I just approached it this time to check if the cat was okay. When I got to it and looked down, I stared at it for a good long while. The cat wasn't breathing at all. It was dead, no question about it. I had my suspicions this might have been the case, so I wasn't entirely shocked, but something was still so off about it. A cat wouldn't just lay down in the middle of a paved sidewalk to die of natural causes, I thought. There was no noticeable blood on or around it, so I began thinking the cat might have jumped from one of the balconies. Just as that thought hit me, a raspy voice spoke to me from above. "Yup, there she is." The voice said in a very matter-of-fact type of tone. I got spooked and quickly glanced up. Through the mist, I saw a middle-aged woman on the 5th-floor balcony leaning over the railing, looking down on me with a lit cigarette in her hand. When our eyes met, a cold shiver shot through the top of my scalp all the way down to my toes in an instant. I may have misinterpreted her facial expression due to the fog, but I could swear she was smiling when our eyes met. Without responding, I immediately turned and quickly walked over to my gate. As I walked, I could hear her laughing. I practically sprinted to my car in the garage. Once I sat down inside, I considered whether I should call the police or not, as every aspect of what I just witnessed gave me the impression that this neighbor of mine had killed the cat. I dialed the number, but decided not to, as they might want me to stick around for questioning, which might get me late to work. So I went on with my night, as usual, doing my best to forget about the incident for now. When I got home later, the cat wasn't there anymore. About a week later, I walked past a neighbor living in the same building as me. We had some usual neighborly small talk, but she interrupted herself to ask me whether I heard about what happened in the other building last week. I said I didn't. She told me that a woman on the 5th floor had thrown her cat down from the balcony in a rage because it peed on the living room carpet. The cat had apparently not died immediately, but all its legs were broken from the initial impact with the concrete pavement. Police were called around 5 a.m. when another dog walker saw the cat. The woman had still been out on the balcony by this point, talking to the guy while he called the police. I believe the woman's other cats were taken away from her and she was fined a few $1,000s. She still lives there and I sometimes see her leaning on the balcony railing when I'm walking my dog. I've never interacted with her after that, and I sincerely hope she never speaks to me again. This was on r/let's not meet by Accomplished Edge 803. I'm exhausted again.
I could have swore you almost nodded off a couple times there, but you made it at least. Anyway, those were 4 Reddit horror stories, and this kicks off Spooky Month for us. Stay tuned for more spooky content.